Kalimera. Good morning.
Good morning.
For many decades, the public perception of journalists has been that of the lone wolf who is only interested in publishing the story. Up to a point, this perception was not far from reality. But times change. The lone wolves have discovered the advantages of being part of packs, collaborating with their communities. This collaboration is a concept that grows stronger day by day. We live in an era where media revenues are shrinking, but the need to report the news is more important than ever. In these circumstances, journalists are often called upon to produce news with a minimum technical means and financial resources. In this new environment, news production with the collaboration of the communities comes and changes the tide. It leads to the publication of stories of high interest to the public with significant impact and which without coalition would either never see the light of day or would be very costly and time-consuming.
In this session, 5 journalists from around the world will showcase how community journalism is done right. They will show how building relationships with the community helped them. It helped them in many ways: to give voice to the voiceless, to unravel injustices by tech companies, to provide insights into the educational system, and to challenge perceptions about elections and climate change. So without further ado, I want to call on stage Michele Silva. Michele Silva comes from Brazil. She used to live in a favela and co-founded Fala, Roça, a local newspaper that advocates for fundamental rights of their community. Michele.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Katerina and Nikos, for the introduction. I'm Michele. I'm Brazilian, representing Rocinha. I think you probably have heard of it. Rocinha is the largest favela in South America, with more than 200,000 inhabitants. I feel like I'm trying to represent them here. I hope I'll do my best, but if I don't, please follow us on social media and check out our website. We have plenty to show you about this place and about these people. Fala Roça was founded 10 years ago by me, some of my friends and family. We absolutely hate the way the mainstream media picture people from that place. And we decided we could do better, and we do. Fala Roça is formed by 12 local young journalists. We were born and raised in that territory. We believe there is nobody able to talk about the favelas the way the very people that are born and raised there can do. And we lack lots of resources. We grew up listening and hearing stories, talking like just the most terrible stuff about us, and it builds character. It kind of molds the way you believe, the things you believe, the way you behave, and the things you can achieve in life. And we believe if we can show different, people can actually understand themselves and the peers around them as people capable to conquer and do pretty much everything they want. So along these 10 years, we built different techniques in the journalism to try to engage this community with us, to try to empower them using journalism as a tool to identify and also try to do something to change the reality that is there for us. And we do this using a couple of kind of similar ways of work that we studied in the university, but we also changed it to reflect the resources we have and the people that we have there to put this together and try to create something different that goes beyond just publishing content, but also following up on that to make sure it's going to have some kind of impact in the real life. We believe that the way we see things happening there is just not just a good way to document that, to build history, but also to try to propose change. And we use the journalism and the visibility we got to try to spread this and also teach other people to do the same so they can kind of carry this knowledge into their own circles in the church, in the school, in the circles that they live among, to share this knowledge. We believe you don't necessarily need to be a journalist to do that, but we believe that the kind of knowledge that we share in this environment can actually empower you to do better. So there are some techniques, some different ways to put this community together that we do. One of them is the journalism workshops. Every year we teach about 20 young people how to actually use the journalism techniques to identify the issues that they live and how to propose changes. It kind of helps these people to see themselves in that community and how they can actually see that the things they've been through their whole lives are actually civil rights violations. And then we can use these platforms, online, printed, video, whatever, to raise awareness around that and actually make some noise and put this in the right eyes to try to propose changes, including political changes. The same for the local history workshops. Sometimes they understand that things we are going through in Brazil, in Rio, in the favelas are like just natural stuff. It kind of is, but it shouldn't be perceived like that, because we should be able to raise these questions and actually don't settle down on that and actually try to seek for some changes. And if you don't know the story behind the things you're going through, you tend to naturalize that and think that's normal. So using the local journalism and the history workshops, we build this community that is more conscious about this stuff. And when something goes on totally different what we expect, they can actually come over and say, listen, Fala Roça, please help me to raise this question to the right eyes, because it's just absolutely not right. We also do the newspaper, printed newspaper, which is a bit controversial in 2023. But we believe when we print these stories and actually deliver this door to door by ourselves, there's something missing here. Don't do your PowerPoints over glasses of wine. Things like this can happen. But we deliver the newspaper door to door because we believe when we start talking about the favelas, people kind of prepare their ears to something bad that's about to happen in front of them. And we're like, guys, no. When they see the pages of the newspaper and they identify their neighbors in the pages, and we are actually not talking about something bad, it changes, it opens their minds to something that can be different of what they see in the TV, in the radio, in the social media. And they kind of build this trust around that because they are seeing us every day in their normal lives. And we come over and say, listen, I live here, I live in the next door. You can also come over to me and talk about your story. You don't need to wait for the newspaper to come here. And then we start talking about the stories that are printed there, and they actually identify themselves with those stories, which makes this community more open to collaborate with us, not just as sources, not just as people that we look for when we need them, but doing this along the years, it kind of formed a community that actually comes to us to actually talk about the things that they're going through and not the other way around. We also try to propose a journalism that is made thinking about a simple language, using memes and co-creating this content. Every time one of our students or people around the community collaborate in the stories with us, it's actually published in collaboration. They co-sign all the stories with us because they own these stories as much as we do, and it makes a lot of difference too. We also use some different ways of distribution, like the WhatsApp broadcast lists, because we want these people to come to our website at the end. It's very important. But if you think about the data plans in Brazil, they cap your data when you reach your limit and you get stuck in WhatsApp. And we believe if they cannot click on the link, we are not delivering the content. So we need to deliver the content in a way that can actually reach these people. Otherwise, it's useless, right? We also have the open newsroom format. We invite these people over once a month to discuss the stories with us. Before we publish, we build the stories together, then publish these stories and keep following up on this. And we are also in all of the events, or pretty much all, many of them, to be there necessarily being part of that community, but not just looking for them when we need them. And it helped us to build this interesting group of people that they are not in our team, but they are also in our team because we build all this in collaboration. I'm going to share a story that happened recently about a tomograph installed in a church. It doesn't make any sense. And during the pandemic, Rio's ex-mayor, Marcelo Crivella, he decided that it was okay to install a tomograph to help on COVID's diagnosis in a church. And it doesn't sound right. It's not right. The community around us found actually about this, and we decided to have this task force to understand what was going on. And we started investigating that and understood that many things behind that were like just because of political motivations and so on. These guys are actually part of these people in this task force. They are from different parts of the community, and we decided to put these strands together to investigate them. In total, we published 18 stories around this tomograph to understand what was going on. In the first moment, they said they couldn't install this equipment outside of the church because it's the only way that's easy accessible, which is a lie. We have other 4 health facilities around Rocinha, including facilities with lifts, with ramps, with all sorts of preparation to receive all sorts of people, and even so, they refused to do that. They wanted to put that in the church, and to do so, they would remove a local market that has been there for 16 years with 240 stalls. They would remove these 40 stalls to open a secondary entrance for the ambulances, and we made these stories to cover that, to actually show people this is actually part of the cultural history of the community. Those 40 people working in that are actually making a living, generating income and jobs from that. It couldn't happen. And all these publications started to build up and get the public eyes. We helped this association to actually go to court and get the right to actually don't remove the stalls to get access to the tomograph. And it ended up becoming a bill in the local city hall to actually make this a public a cultural heritage of the city. At the end of the story, the tomograph was installed for a few weeks, then removed to a local health facility. The mayor at the time is now in jail. Not right now, he's not in jail anymore, but he got arrested because of corruption scandals. And right now, we are trying to understand what's going to be the next steps for the tomograph. It's not working at the moment. All these things, I'm not sure if I was able to explain the correct facts, but it's all made with the help of the community. And the first day, Hannah was talking about the motto that the community with impairment and disability uses, nothing with us about us. Nothing about us without us. And it's something that we also use in the favelas journalism because we believe that's just not right, that somebody just comes over to our place, make 1 or 2 stories about us and then just leave, because it just reinforces stereotypes that are there. So if you ever decide to learn more or talk about people in minority, any kind of minority groups, especially talking about mine in the favelas in Brazil, you can come over and talk to us. I'm pretty sure it's going to make your work richer and more inclusive. And that's what I have to say today. I'm sorry I go way over the time, but thank you.
Thank you, Michele. Moving on, Florencia Rodríguez Altube will show us how La Nación, a national outlet in Argentina, monitored election results through collaborative data journalism and AI. Florencia, please.
Hi. Oh, okay, it's working. Hi, how are you? Well, let me see. Well, the Argentine electoral system is quite complex, not only due to the large number of candidates running every 4 years to govern the country, or every 2 years to enter Congress, but also because of the mechanism itself. In my country, which is located in South America, voting is mandatory for every citizen over 18 and manually performed using paper ballots in more than 16,000 schools across the country. During each elections, once the voting period ends, the electoral authorities manually count the votes inside the ballot box and then proceed to fill in an official document by hand known as electoral report. This document indicates various details, such as, for example, the total number of voters who cast their vote, the total number of votes for each political party, and it also includes the signature and the ID from the chief officer who fill in the document and from other political parties who oversee and ensure the integrity of the civic process. After that, all the telegrams are sent to the Electoral Justice, which is responsible for gathering more than 105,000 electoral documents from across the country. So, given the extensive nature of manual process, there is room for potential mistakes, isn't there? For that reason, at La Nación, we decided to recreate the previous project, but take it to the next level. We have combined technology and open collaboration to monitor the proper functioning of the legislative elections in Argentina. But why did I use the word recreate? Because our first time analyzing electoral documents was in 2015. On that occasion, we decided to analyze a representative sample of telegrams manually with volunteers and found it that 48% had issues. So, well, we improved that project for our last elections by using AI computer vision to detect if there was relevant information missing in those documents. So how did we do it? After the election night, we decided to download all the documents from the electoral API, and we selected carefully a sample of provinces. All of them had the highest electoral weight in Argentina, and all of them were governed by different political parties. So why did we opt for a sample instead of analyzing the whole country? It was because of time constraints. We undertook this project with our main goal being to evaluate the accuracy of our algorithm for improvement and use after the general elections. We believe that open collaboration is the key to producing higher quality and more in-depth journalism. That's why we partnered with Dawes, a software company, to design together an algorithm that will help us detect the blank spaces. Some highlights of our algorithm design, including rejecting the use of conventional services that detect and digitalize tables. Instead, we implemented a solution that used the rectangular view of the telegram as a reference. We adapted this to each one of the analyzed districts, as each province had different telegrams design, and each revised file was measured considering width and height in pixels. So we also converted the pixels from our document from an RGB color model to a grayscale, and as a result, we obtain a unique value that only varies its intensity from black to white. And we also use an algorithm to soften the drawings of signature to avoid false positives of missing signatures when the ink use was not dark enough for a definition. Well, to say it simply, what we did was something like that. Do you know that game? It's a battleship game. But with our telegrams, we asked for the artificial intelligence to search in a certain point of, in a certain coordinate of our document if there was the information or not. So, well, after running our initial algorithm, we were able to identify those telegrams with potential mistakes. They were around 40,000 documents, but knowing that AI is not perfect and has a certain margin of error, we decided to manually verify the data with some help from the audience. And through social media and by publishing an article on La Nación, that's where I work, we called for volunteers and gathered more than 300 students from 10 local universities and 4 NGOs in the country. So, at the same time, we proceeded to upload all the documents to Voutsina, that is an online open source collaborative platform inspired by free files from ProPublica and non-MP's expenses. Voutsina was developed in-house in 2014 thanks to alliance with Knight Foundation and Civicus, and its aim is to provide the citizens with a tool to classify and transform the information into the document into useful information. And well, we trained all these volunteers to use the platform so they could discover the information for themselves. And we also organize hackathons or civic marathons where we check the information together. And that's how our platform works. Well, on the left side, the people could view the telegram, and on the right side, they have to check whether the information was filling or missing by clicking yes or no. And in addition, they had a text box to write down any relevant information they thought. So in order to persist in our database the information about a single telegram, the system needed 3 validations. I mean, 3 different users to classify the information in the same way in all the mandatory fields of the form. One interesting aspect about Voutsina is that the platform allows the creation of teams and has a ranking of unlocked documents, encouraging participation through a sense of healthy competition. And with the insight provided by the participants, we were able to adjust our algorithm. We found some mistakes. The main issues with the initial algorithm were some false positives that came up due to some telegrams being scanned upside down or distorted. So the algorithm struggled to accurately identify those empty areas. So we correct that and run it again. And for the general elections, we ran the algorithm and published an article outlining our project and listed the percentage of telegrams that had any kind of issue broken down by type of error. For example, the percentage of telegrams that did not have any signature, or the percentage of telegrams where the total number of votes for political parties did not match with the total number of envelopes that should have been placed inside the ballot box. Well, what are the main takeaways from this project? First of all, experimenting with AI takes time, and open collaboration is a great shortcut. Don't be afraid to collaborate. There is a lot of people out there. Students, universities, NGOs, companies. Don't be afraid. Collaborate, please. Second, there is an inherent margin of error while using AI, and human validation is crucial to prevent biases and mistakes. Third, crowdsourcing is much more simpler when you have a shared and essential goal, that in our case was monitoring the electoral process in Argentina. And last but not least, while we didn't find any fraud, I think we conveyed a powerful message, not only as a media, but also as a society, that together we were watching. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florencia. That was a lot to take in 8 minutes, so well done. Moving on, I want to call on stage Nick Dawes. Nick Dawes is the publisher of The City, a local newspaper in New York City. And he has done something remarkable. The reporters had built true relationships of trust with parents and teachers. And that was the way to report on mental health of students.
Thanks, Katerina. So yes, The City is a local news outlet in New York that tries to serve New Yorkers through both investigative journalism that enables them and helps them to hold power to account, and through constructive, explanatory journalism, service journalism, and tools that help them to navigate complex issues. And that can be anything from voting to housing, getting your heat turned on in your apartment, dealing with rent issues, to policy issues. The strand of reporting that I want to talk about today really brings together those two elements of our work. On the one hand, accountability, and on the other hand, service. And what we believe and what we're testing and increasingly finding out is that to cut through news avoidance, and to build trust with communities that have been underserved and often really treated quite hostilely by traditional media, to combine accountability work, explanatory and service journalism on the basis of community engagement and community questions enables us to move the story forward much more effectively, build more relevant coverage and more enduring relationships that continue to circle back. So this work is built on a long-standing strand of investigation we've done into the crisis in youth mental health in New York State. And the first round of reporting was on cuts to psychiatric care and psychiatric beds, which prompted state-level hearings by the Attorney General and ultimately a $1.5 billion increase in the budget for youth psychiatric care in New York. But it also prompted a lot of questions, and a lot of people in our networks contacted us to say, you're missing a massive element of the story. And you're missing an element of the story that is about how mental health crises are handled in New York City public schools, particularly in lower income neighborhoods and communities of color. And we'll get into a little bit of what we found. But we decided to bring a pretty full spectrum approach to this issue. We conducted investigative reporting into how New York City schools handle children in mental health crisis. We made a collaboration with 3 separate newsrooms, ProPublica, Chalkbeat, an education specialist, and our own newsroom. We built an interactive tool that tracks, it says dozens on the slide, actually many, many thousands of data points. We held open newsroom sessions with the community, and we provided digital forms of call-out and interaction with our team. And I want to show you a little bit of what that all produced. So the first thing we found is that schools overwhelmingly resort to the police when children are experiencing extreme emotional or psychiatric crisis. Instead of calling a social worker, they call 911, which they're not supposed to do. There is regulation to prevent that. That means kids as young as 5 are ending up in handcuffs when they're in moments of profound emotional distress. And this is happening more than 3,000 times a year in New York City. We also found that, of course, and not surprisingly, it's overwhelmingly children of color that end up in these situations, and that kids who encounter police in these situations instead of other forms of care are much more likely to avoid any interaction with officials and to end up in prison. We also found that in charter schools, which are privately run but publicly funded, there is almost no accountability around these practices, and they're able to avoid city regulations almost completely. So that was the core investigative sting of our reporting, built on deep conversations with parents, educators, and kids. But we didn't want to just deliver the investigative punch. We wanted to deliver resources as well, and we do find that where we're able to provide something that's helpful and constructive to our audiences and communities that are affected, that's enormously powerful. So we built a tool scraping data from both schools and from the NYPD to identify which schools this is happening in at the highest rates. Also to identify what resources are available in those schools, so that if you are looking at the school in your neighborhood, the school that your kids go to, or a school that you're considering, or if you're an advocate or policy person and you want to understand these issues, you can dig in a great deal of detail to the data about how many guidance counselors and social workers are in a school, how often do they call 911. We also serve up contextual robotext that can give you access to numbers to call if you have difficulties dealing with these issues. So, this is an example of some of the stuff you'll find in the tool. It's very easy to use. You simply enter the name of a school or click on a neighborhood, and it brings up the data. As one parent said to us, we might not have the kind of resources that you have in Park Slope, which happens to be where I live, kind of a fancy neighborhood, but we can take these numbers and put them to work. We also provided some pretty straightforward ways of interacting with the community. On the left, you can see our text messaging call-out, which we distributed pretty widely, also shared with advocates and community groups to bring in more questions and find out what parents wanted to know. And then working with our partners at the education specialist outlet Chalkbeat, we created a series of explanatory resources for parents and advocates. And we held open newsroom sessions with the Brooklyn Public Library. And we brought in some journalists to work on this, but also lawyers, advocates, and one kid to provoke a conversation and attract more questions. So we also want to make some of these resources available to other journalists. We had some complex data work to do here. That's available on our Git repo if anyone is interested. We had to figure out how to combine the NYPD and DOE data. We have a blog up on that if anyone wants to access it, explaining how we did that work. Really bringing this full spectrum approach to bear produced enormously powerful outcomes. We're seeing people still using this tool every day. We have provoked conversations at the level of the city council and the mayor's office. And what worked was collaboration across these three outlets. ProPublica provided financial support for a reporting fellow. Chalkbeat added educational expertise. And we worked across our data teams and our neighborhood reporting teams and community engagement teams to stitch it all together. So collaborate. Engage. Parents, students, teachers, experts were part of this process very much from the beginning. Secondly, help. Don't just punch people in the face with the investigative story. Offer them other routes in and resources. Finally, share. We really do want to make these techniques and resources as widely available to other reporters as we can, other news organizations. So that's all available on our site. I'm happy to share them afterwards if people are interested. And finally, follow up. We have new projects in the works that come out of the networks that we've built through this process. If anyone is interested in picking up on that afterwards, I'm happy to email links and share resources with all of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. Rachel Hamada comes from the United Kingdom and the Bureau on Investigative Journalism. She will show us how they worked with citizens to build an evidence base about hidden inequalities at UK homes, a base that citizens and campaigners can use to push for positive change. Please, Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikos. It's great to be here today. My name's Rachel Hamada, and I'm a journalist and community organiser. I work for the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which is a non-profit newsroom in the UK, which my colleague Lily helpfully introduced in quite a lot of detail in the last talk, so I won't go into too much depth. I'm going to talk a little bit today about an investigation that we did called Hot Homes. So just to set the scene a bit, we ran a health inequalities strand for a number of years. That started prior to COVID and continued throughout. And one message that kept coming through from communities that we were working with is please look at heat, look at the urban heat island effect, look at how some communities are disproportionately affected by increasing heat in the UK. I appreciate some people come from countries that are a lot hotter in the UK and might think that it's kind of funny that heat waves in the UK are even creating an issue. But I'll come to why it's a particular problem in the UK. To look at kind of narratives around heatwave in the UK, this is a fairly classic article from this summer from the Daily Mail newspaper. And the theme is all about how when it's sunny, you get to hang out on the beach and have a great time, sink some cold pints in the pub beer garden, and if you're a kid, eat lots of ice cream. So that's the resounding narrative around heatwave in the UK. Climate change generally is still perceived as something that's happening kind of over there, as opposed to something that's affecting people in the UK at this point, and it's definitely a barrier to action. So that's something we wanted to contribute to changing. So looking at the reality, the Committee on Climate Change back in 2019 published a report looking at UK housing. And they said, UK homes are not fit for the future. Efforts to adapt the housing stock for higher temperatures are falling far behind the increase in risk from the changing climate. The quality, design, and use of homes across the UK must be improved now to address the challenges of climate change. In the years following that report, very little has changed. So we were particularly interested in looking at, for that reason, what heat means indoors, inside people's homes. People who are particularly marginalised are, unsurprisingly, most at risk. Older people, people who have existing illnesses, people with disabilities, people who can't afford electricity. Babies and young children are particularly in danger. The World Health Organization recommends that 25 degrees should be the maximum temperature for adults indoors in cities like London and Birmingham. For babies, the upper limit is 20 degrees. But what we were being told is that people's homes were regularly far above these temperatures, but there was no robust evidence to show this. In particular, sustained heat is dangerous, so where there's high heat over several days with no respite. We developed a model, I won't go into this in too much detail because of time, but we developed a model to look at all the cumulative layering of disadvantage that leads to people either becoming more sick from the heat or even kind of worst case scenario dying. So to the science, we got talking to the Urban Big Data Centre at Glasgow University, who had done a pilot with some monitors in people's homes, a very small pilot. And we talked to them about doing an expanded version of that. So we got hold of these heat monitors. These heat monitors measure temperature, humidity, air pollution, and also VOCs in people's homes. We then decided where to focus our efforts. So we focused in on Southwark, which is an area of London. Southwark was the second hottest place in the UK in 2021. And it also has a really wide mix of populations, of housing types, and housing tenures. So that's why we focused in on Southwark. We issued a call out, we put this online, we got it in lots of community newsletters, we did a lot of on-the-ground engagement, so we went to community groups, we went to early year centres, food banks, we went to anti-gentrification protests, and we talked to lots and lots of people and told them what we were doing. I'm going to show you a video now from my colleague Dahaba, and she's talking about what the project is about to try and get people to sign up.
Now the weather's heating up. Are you finding it too hot at home? Is it affecting your sleep or making you feel unwell? If so, then you might like to take part in our community project. I'm Dahaba Al-Hussein, and this summer, journalists like me are working with scientists to find out how hot our homes really get and what this means for our health. Experts say half our homes are at risk of overheating. Exposure to high temperatures for long periods of time can be bad for all of our health, but some people are more vulnerable, like older people, people with heart and lung conditions, or other health difficulties. We're looking for people in certain parts of Southwark in London to take a temperature monitor into their homes for a few weeks and speak to us about their experiences. If you're interested, go to tbij.com/hothomes where there's lots more information. Everyone selected to take part gets a voucher and the project starts later in July, so now's the time to sign up.
Great, thanks Dahaba. So we've literally just finished our 6-week monitoring process. It's been slightly annoyingly for us, quite a cool summer in the UK this year, but there was a standout kind of 1-week heat wave at the end of the period, actually in September, which is extremely unusual, especially that it went on for so long. So that, I think, it probably will have enabled us to get some quite useful data. During the monitoring period, we didn't want to just rely on the quantitative data from the monitors. We wanted to find out what people's experiences of the heat were and what their concerns were. So we used SMS technology. We sent out mini newsletters at the start of each week. We had a different focus each week. So one was health, one was housing, one was well-being and work, etc. We also gave people lots of different opportunities to engage. Some key themes emerging were, as I mentioned before, babies and young children being particularly at risk, and people being really concerned for the health of young children. This is one of our participants, Phyllis, who lives with a disability that is particularly exacerbated by heat. And she was one of the numerous people in our project who had to go and seek extra medical help during the monitoring period because of the heat in her home. There was also a young man with no underlying health issues who had to go and present to A&E at the local hospital the same week because of his experiences. This lady, Ursula, also has disabilities that are exacerbated by the heat, and her son has respiratory issues. Their home gets so hot during the summer, he can't sleep in his bedroom. They can't even stay in their house most of the time. They go and hang out at friends' houses just to get by, and they describe their home as a heat chamber. And this is another participant, Kathleen. I will read her words aloud, but she has multiple issues with heat in her house. She says, "My son has cerebral palsy and the heat is affecting his mobility. The doctors have written countless medical letters to the council saying we need to be moved, but we're still waiting. It's depressing. It's really depressing. I'm talking to you now and I'm holding in my tears because how many times can I tell this story?" So there's been lots and lots of people that have been talking to us about their experiences, and this is something we're going to represent in the final reporting. One thing that's interesting to mention is that lots of different types of housing are affected. It's not just it's not just what you might anticipate to be less expensive housing. It's quite expensive luxury new builds are also affected. But people who are better off tend to have fewer underlying health conditions. They also tend to have more budget for electricity and for mitigations, like air conditioning, fans, etc. A number of participants also said that they could really feel the impacts of climate change and were scared for the future. So what next? Our plan is to share the data that we crunch with participants. Everyone will get the data on their own home. They'll get context with which to interpret that so they can hold their landlord, council, or whatever to account. We're going to carry out targeted focus groups to talk to people once we get the results. We're also going to have workshops so that we can do collaborative data storytelling with our findings. We're going to publish our findings at the start of COP with both UK and overseas media partners. Impact, as Lily mentioned before, is really important to us. So the Mayor of London commissioned a London Climate Resilience Plan that's due in December. Our findings will feed into that. Southwark Council has also put out a consultation looking at climate adaptations for housing. We're going to feed into that too. We're working with planning firms, architecture firms, and so on. Lastly, we're going to evaluate the pilot, and we're going to look at whether we can expand the model from what we learn next summer, possibly within the UK to more locations, or potentially internationally. Thank you for listening, and please get in touch. Happy to share more about this work or answer any questions, and my email's on there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So this session closes with Bragg Ko. Bragg comes from the US, and the Markup. The Markup is a pioneering online publication that challenges tech in general. And Ko is here to talk about how they work with local partners to localize tech stories.
Okay, hi. My name's Ko, K-O, Ko, that's it. And I am an editor at the Markup, which I will talk about what we do in just a second. But I know it's Saturday, we're in Greece, so I want to make sure everyone's awake. I know, so show of hands, how many of you use technology in your daily lives? Everyone's hand should be up, love to see it. Technology likely fueled your ride here. And at a minimum, it's going to be responsible for the next 8 minutes that we have together. But despite how pervasive technology has become in our day-to-day lives, it's not reaching everyone equally. And when it is, like most things in society, everyone doesn't have the same level of access to it. Like a lot of things that are, even the most automated thing was built by a human being. And so with that, we carry over different biases and things like that. And so that's where the markup comes in. This is just an overview of what we'll be doing together today. I'm going to talk about our mission, our method, why we believe that all tech is local, how we work with local partners to like not reinvent audience wheels and funnels, and then just some of the like tools that we provide as a result of our work. So the markup, which is where I work, our mission is to challenge technology to serve the public good. So we are focused on impact, like a lot of nonprofit outlets are, and we build tools and provide blueprints for other journalists and researchers to replicate our work. We also see that as impact. So this is the markup method. We literally show our work, which means that as a result of a big investigation, we are building bespoke data sets, but then we are also telling people how we do them. These are examples of two of our methodologies from stories that I'll be talking about in a minute. But as a result, well, as part of the reporting process, we send out our methodology to the companies that we're investigating. They're also peer reviewed by other data scientists to make sure that everything is in a row and that our facts are indisputable. And so that's a little bit about the markup method and what that means. Not me messing up the technology. Okay. So we think about technology, even though we're a national publication, we believe that all tech is local. And so what that means is, to me anyway, is that there's no shortage of coverage about Silicon Valley. A lot of the people who are building the tech don't look like the people who are making the tech work on a day-to-day basis. We have a lot of white male billionaires in Silicon Valley, but the people who are driving the food to you or driving your Ubers or delivering your Amazon packages often look like me. And so one of the things that we like to do is to make it clear to people that like YouTube may exist in Silicon Valley, but the way you experience YouTube in your communities is going to be on a more localized, tangible basis. And so these are examples of like the tech that we investigate. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we make it local by working with partners in two ways. So these are three stories that we're all either, like, we worked in different ways for local outlets to get them. So we have this story where the reporter Lam worked with the very small Vietnamese community in, or a small subset of it in the Bay Area in California, and she looked at their YouTube records to just kind of understand how misinformation was spreading in this community that is cut off from local news because a lot of local outlets don't republish their things in the language that people are speaking. And so what we wanted to understand was how people were actually using YouTube in their day-to-day basis. And so that's an example of a story that we ran with a local outlet in Oakland. And then I'm getting ready to talk about the scoring system in Los Angeles. So I'll skip that for now, but we published that with the LA Times. And then the third story, False Alarm, is about an algorithm that the state of Wisconsin created to evaluate which students were at risk of dropping out of high school, and it labeled Black students more often than any other group of students as at risk for dropping out, but it actually didn't help anyone. So a lot of the students that we talked to basically were like, why do I have this additional label on me, especially if it's not giving me any resources? Okay. So as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about this story that we did with the LA Times, which basically a lot of the work that we do, particularly when we're looking at algorithms or scoring systems, means that we are finding an aspect of technology that people can't see or they don't realize is impacting them. So there's a level of education that comes with our reporting. So a lot of times when we talk to people, we're telling them for the first time that this system is tracking them, or in this case, people who are experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles, when they meet with a case manager, they get a score, and it's your vulnerability score. And the higher you rank, the more likely you are to get housing, and Black people were getting scores that meant that they were less likely to get housing, even though they were overrepresented in the homeless population in LA. And so there was a lot of data analysis that went into that, and so that, in addition to the investigation that we published, we also have what I explained earlier, which is our methodologies, our show your work method. And so we made it so that other reporters or other data scientists who wanted to replicate this work have a blueprint to do that. And so this is another story that this is something that I'm like really looking forward for us to do in the future. We had this huge investigation come out last year called Still Loading, which is about internet disparities in the US. And the lead anecdote in the investigation was from my hometown, New Orleans, where a woman was like, her internet was so bad she couldn't get on Zoom calls, which obviously in the beginning of the pandemic was like a huge way we were connecting for work, for school, and her internet was 400 times slower than the white neighborhood across town, and she was paying the same price. And so we looked at 38 cities and what that meant and what the digital divide looked like. And out of that, we were only able to focus anecdotally on a few places. And it meant we had this like overwhelming amount of data that was just gonna sit in spreadsheets. And so we started reaching out to local outlets to say, hi, like your city has a huge digital divide. We have already done a lot of the analysis. We can walk you through the data. And this is an example of the outlets that took our data, sat with our reporters to figure out how to tell a story in their network. And that's really important for us as a business because we know what's happening in local outlets throughout the US, which is they're disappearing overnight. And so what's left is not a lot of resources to cover things that we cover really well. And so we are hoping to do more of this, which is finding big data sets and offering them and actually teaching local reporters how to use the data that we're finding. And so out of this, there's also a lot of like service elements. So what you see here is, we love acronyms at the Markup. So this is BYOD, build your own data set. So we established a like checklist for people who want to recreate the investigation outside of one of the 38 cities that we originally found data from. So just finding ways for people to be able to do the work we're doing at home. And another example of this that I'll go through quickly is story recipes. So where fitting, we have our reporters put together both of these stories that I just walked through have story recipes, which is like, we're literally talking to journalists. We're saying, this is how we did it. Here's some tips, even if it's not directly applicable to you and your neighborhood, then just like, I don't know, this is a good place to start. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our tool shed. We build a lot of tools at the Markup as part of like our mission. And Blacklight is one of our early tools. And basically you can put it in any website and see how it tracks you. And so we use that in a lot of our reporting, especially on Meta and how it follows you across the internet. Small links, which you can't see in this version of my slide, but you should look at it in markup.org/tools. Basically, if you use bit.ly or a link shortener, that link is going to track you across the internet. So anyone who clicks on it, we care a lot about privacy. We don't track our users or site visitors. And so if you want to shorten your link and not risk privacy, then we have a tool for that. USPS, which, if you're from the US, is also what we call our postal service, is a way to get a random address sampling from anywhere in the US, basically. And then lastly is a new tool. It's the biggest one for a reason. Twitter is slowing down links to its competitors. So when you click on a link that takes you to Substack or the Washington Post or other news outlets, it takes like 60 times as long to load. And so we're just kind of following the ways that Twitter is making it harder to use. And all you have to do is just put in a link from Twitter in our little tool, and you'll be able to test for yourself. I hope that there are some people in here we get to work with in the future. Thank you for listening to me. That's all.
Please come on stage. Come on stage, all of you, come on stage. We want to thank you all for coming here with us and sharing the amazing job you all do, and through your job that you prove that the power of collaboration is really important nowadays, now in this media environment that's created during our times. Thank you very, very much for being here with us. Now, I'm sure that all of you have some questions. Unfortunately, time is not our ally, so reach out to the guys here. They're going to be here around the forum, and whatever question you have, you can contact them. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And in case you haven't noticed in your app, there is a great panel and a keynote coming up on the €1 million question, sustainability models for media. So stay here and enjoy the next panel.